Welcome back. Today we are continuing to dive into some cognitive distortions, the accompanying deception, and how to break free. I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't yet, and I'm going to give a brief recap, but really it's well worth your time. Hey there! Are you a Christian woman who's ready to strengthen your faith and stop the madness in your mind? The worry, doubt, anxiety. Do you want something more for your life but are not sure where to even begin? You've come to the right place. Hi, I'm Kristin Campbell. I'm excited that you're here as we journey together to discover mindset renewal and empowered faith for the Christian woman. I'm probably going to spend the rest of the month dealing with these cognitive distortions. And I'm going to do my best to cover as many as I can because it's so important that we are aware of what they are and how they are wreaking havoc in our life. So last week we discussed 2 major ones that I come across with my clients and even in my own life. And those were emotional reasoning, which says I feel it, so it must be true, even when no evidence is present. And we talked about feelings not being facts. That actually was an episode on February 14th. We talked about real not equaling true. There has to be a separation of the feeling from the assumption. You could have a real feeling with a false assumption. We also talked about the cognitive distortion of overgeneralization. This is a sneaky one. This is where it takes one instance and it generalizes it to an overall life pattern. And once we buy into that lie, we develop negative thought patterns, limiting beliefs that drive our behaviors and ultimately our life's trajectory. We can so easily get out of alignment with God's original, good, abundant, blessed plan for our lives. But there is hope, always, right? Once we recognize the lie, the distortion, no matter how often we may have unknowingly reinforced it as quote-unquote truth, once recognized, we can break agreement with it. We can replace it with truth and trust the Lord to restore us, to use what the enemy meant for evil in our lives for good, according to Genesis 50:20. So today, let's continue to call these lies out. These cognitive distortions. Again, if you missed part 1, please, after today's episode, go back and take a listen. But I want to recap for you. Cognitive distortions are thoughts, cognitive, that are altered in some way from the original. They're twisted, they're distorted. But we believe them to be true. It's a deception. And if you are ever thinking, because I'm not going to cover all the cognitive distortions out there, but if you're ever thinking, I wonder if this thought could be a cognitive distortion, well, it just may be. So please take it to the Lord for clarification and get support. Because again, when we are deceived, we don't know we are. We need help. We were built to be in community, okay? Please reach out. It's so important. You are worth it. So let's continue today. I'm going to start with all or nothing thinking, this polarized thinking, black and white thinking. And this distortion, it thrives on extremes, leading you to be incapable or unwilling to see shades of gray, to see alternative interpretations. It's dominated by language such as always, never, either or. Either I'm perfect or I'm a failure. And listen, you do not need to speak those words out loud. It's a cognitive distortion. Remember, it's in your thoughts. So you may never say it, but if you're thinking it, you're believing it, and your behaviors are driven by it. You know, a lot of times we know what's socially acceptable to say or not say. We're not playing these games here. We are going to our hearts. The Lord knows your thoughts. Psalm 139. So get honest. This either or mentality, it's a trap for many of us. And it can sound like, I'm having trouble doing this project. I can't do anything right. I've been there. Remember, real does not equal true. The reality is you are having trouble doing the project. Okay, that's real. But if you can step out of that extreme, take a look at that statement, I can't do anything right. You mean to tell me that throughout your whole life, you haven't done one thing right? You have evidence that concretely shows that in your lifetime, you can't do anything right? That's really doubtful. Take a moment. Recall the times you did succeed. Think of a time you did overcome an obstacle, a time you persevered to get a task done. When you can step out of the extremes, then you can reframe the thought. I'm having trouble doing this project. Yeah, that's still a reality. And I am capable of doing hard things. That's true. You have proof of that. Now everything changes. So there are a lot of red flags that will alert you to this all or nothing lie at work in your life, if you choose to recognize them. Language of always, never, either or. I'm going to add should and must in here. But I want you to know that should and must are actually, they could be their own cognitive distortion. And you're going to see that so many of these distortions overlap. So the should and the must statements, they're definitely red flags. Pay attention. They're red flags to either this all or nothing thinking or to a cognitive distortion of imposing expectations. Both are going to lead to feelings of shame or failure, disappointment in yourself or others. They're going to lead to negative beliefs. Because see, these imposing expectations, they're going to sound like, I should be married by now, or I must make partner by age 35. There's this imposing expectation, but it has an underlying hidden either or message. So when you say, I should be married by now, there's this lingering or what? You're unlovable? You're not good enough? When you say, I must make partner by age 35, what's lingering in that or? You're not good enough? You're not smart? You're a failure? See, you get locked into that expectation that may not be realistic or even God's original plan for your life. Yet if you don't meet it, you are very self-critical and you just can't see any alternative. So while it could be its own distortion, it's really closely tied to this all or nothing distortion too. But again, it's the same solution, the awareness of this distortion in operation in your life, asking the Lord to reveal it to you, asking a trusted friend, family member, therapist, life coach, bring this thing to light. Bring it before the Lord. Does the thought align with what God says in His Word? Does it align with His character? Listen, most of the time it's not going to because it's a lie and God is truth. So then reframing your thoughts to align with truth. Get scripture. Rebuild these thought patterns. I have the mind of Christ according to 1 Corinthians 2:16. I am the head and not the tail according to Deuteronomy 28:13. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but the Lord's plan prevails. Proverbs 19:21. You have to reframe it. Okay, I really want to cover one more distortion today before we close, and then next week we'll go through a few more. I want to take my time and go deep in these because I want to bring these things to light so you can get free of them. So today, I'm going to wrap it up with the distortion of personalization. And this is when you take everything personally. Everything. You blame yourself even when there is no logical reason to think you are to blame. Now, I struggled for years with this one. I believed I was the reason that people around me didn't have the best experiences or they ended up having bad ones. I believed I was responsible for my places of employment struggling. If they were struggling to make sales, I believed it was my fault, even when I wasn't a sales rep. I believed that I was to blame for anything that went wrong around me. I believed the distortion, the lie from the enemy that it was all my fault. I was bad luck. And maybe you've also experienced this in your life. And you kind of get to a point of assuming that bad things are just going to happen. And again, that's another cognitive distortion that we're going to cover later on. But this personalization distortion, this puts everything on your shoulders. And it took me sharing. I did not know that I was living this lie. I didn't know I was reinforcing it. Remember, when you're deceived, you don't know it. But I shared a situation where this personalization was obvious. I was taking blame for something that logically was out of my control. When my therapist said to me very lovingly, but very firmly, "Kristin, you are not that good." And it was exactly the slap back to truth that I needed. Perhaps you need that tough love today too. Friend, you are not that good. Thank God that you are not responsible for everything happening around you. That's great news. God alone is sovereign. He alone has supreme power, control, and authority over the happenings in this life. Yes, we have choices, but nothing that we choose or do is going to overrule or overthrow the Lord of the universe. If and when we make poor choices, because we do, we can seek forgiveness and allow the Lord to direct our next steps. We don't have to beat ourselves up with blame. We don't have to try to fix it on our own. We don't have to carry the weight and the responsibility of the world on our shoulders. We can't. I can't. You can't. We are not that powerful. Matthew 5:26 warns us to not take an oath by our heads because we can't make one hair black or white. Look, we do not have that level of control, power, or authority to be responsible for everything around us. No. If you're living in the personalization distortion, check your heart with the Lord. Talk with someone about what's happening. What's keeping this lie alive? Is it pride? Is it control? Is it fear? What's feeding it? And I encourage you to begin to listen to your inner dialogue to see what cognitive distortion you can recognize. I hope to see you back here next week as we continue this discussion. Be blessed. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. I hope you walked away a little stronger in your faith and freer in your mind. You are so loved. If you like this episode, share it with a friend. Leave your ratings and reviews, and engage with me on social media. I'd love to hear from you.